Canada's in big trouble.
Trouble?
They're facing massive social and economic upheaval, which seems to be getting worse and worse every day. Canada has a housing and cost of living crisis, which is literally pushing millions of hardworking citizens towards poverty and into homelessness. Now, this should serve as a gigantic warning for Australia, because shockingly, we're mirroring the same Canadian policies that have created this complete and utter disaster. I'm Biko Konstantinos, and that's what we're going to talk about today. If you're looking for a good-looking, charismatic, and very knowledgeable YouTube presenter, then you've come to the wrong bloody place. But if you're looking for all your wildest dreams to come true, what can I say? Give us a like and subscribe and you'll find out. Now let's check out what's happening in Canada and why it's a huge warning for Australia. Canada and Australia share a very unfortunate achievement. They both have some of the most expensive housing in the entire world. Now, the weirdest thing about this achievement is that both Canada and Australia have some of the largest land mass out of every other country. They've both got so much space compared to each citizen that from the outside, you would definitely not expect there to be a housing crisis. So why on earth would Canada and Australia have more expensive housing than other much smaller and population dense countries? Well, one of the main reasons is that property in both these countries is one of the favorite and most easiest ways to grow wealth. When you can make more money just by owning a property than working for an entire year at a job, it creates massive speculative demand into the property market. And that's exactly what's happened in both Canada and Australia. And when these gains are supported by very generous housing policies for property owners, everyone wants a piece of that lucrative housing pie. Now, on the Demographia Housing Affordability Report, Sydney's classed as the second worst affordable city. But did you know that Vancouver, Canada is classed as the third worst affordable city? And if we look at the entire 10 least affordable cities, Australia has Sydney and Melbourne, while Canada has Vancouver and Toronto. So both Australians and Canadians can rest assured knowing that their countries have completely destroyed housing affordability. While property owners are licking their lips at the ridiculous house price gains over the last 30 years and especially the last few years since COVID, non-property owners have been completely abandoned, pushed towards poverty, and many of them become homeless. This goes completely against the goal of a thriving society, which ensures an adequate supply of affordable housing for all its citizens. So before COVID, both Canada and Australia already had some of the most expensive housing in the entire planet. But since COVID, prices have gone from ridiculous to completely insane. Now, apart from the effect of the lockdowns combined with the largest stimulus program we've ever seen, both Canada and Australia have done something else to cause mayhem in their housing markets, and that's record out of control immigration. Most of this data I'm sharing is from Leith Van Onselen of Macro Business. According to Leith, no country has botched up its immigration policy more than Canada. Employment, housing infrastructure, and healthcare systems are all in disarray. And why? Because Canada's population expanded by more than 1.2 million people last year. Now, if we look at historical annual growth in total population, the average from 1950 all the way through till COVID seemed to be around that 300,000 to 400,000 annual growth per year. Now, to go from that to 1.2 million, being about 3 times the historical average, is plain insanity. Now, just like Canada, Australia has followed the exact same population surge, sending immigration through the roof and seeing annual population growth of 2.5%, which is the nation's highest level since 1952. But even that 2.5% growth in population seems quite tame compared to Canada's 3.2%. By the looks of it, Canada has completely lost control of immigration recession, and as a result, their population is surging by astronomical amounts. I mean, just look at this exponential rise Canada's seen for foreign students. Now, what's been the net effect of these immigration policies in Canada? First off, rents are surging. You can see by this chart how rents in Orange were quite stable prior to COVID, rising about 1.5 to 2% each year on average. Before COVID, rents were starting to spike, but now look at rents after COVID, rising by more than 7%. Now check out the correlation between rents and non-permanent residents. Now on this same chart, non-permanent resident growth is in blue, and you can see the huge impact it has on rents. Everybody needs a place to live, and when you've got more and more people competing for the same amount of properties, the additional demand causes a huge spike in rent prices. Now, just like Australia, the mantra in Canada has been all about housing supply. We need to build more houses, more dense housing, all the rest of it.
We need more homes right across the country. That's exactly why we launched the Housing Accelerator Fund, to build more homes faster.
But just like Australia, nothing is really happening. Here we can see the change in population versus new housing starts. And as you can see, population growth's out of control, while the number of new housing being built is actually decreasing. So we've got rents surging, and at the same time, vacancy rates for available rentals has been plummeting. So just like Australia, Canada has made it extremely difficult for renters. They're suffering through ridiculous rent surges way above the level of wage increases, and on top of that, there's so few rentals available that it's even a struggle to find a place. And that's why homelessness in Canada and Australia is starting to surge. And the most ridiculous thing about it is that hard-working citizens working full-time can find themselves homeless because they either can't afford the rent increases or they simply can't find a rental to live in. And that, my friend, is an absolute betrayal in my opinion. When you ridiculously increase the population levels without planning for enough housing, you're condemning millions of renters to poverty. But at the same time, you're ensuring that property owners have basically won the lotto because you've inflated house prices and at the same time made sure that property investors are cashing in on surging rents. Now listen to this clip from the Canadian Prime Minister acknowledging that immigration levels are out of control.
Over the past few years, we've seen a massive spike in temporary immigration, whether it's temporary foreign workers or whether it's international students in particular. They have grown at a rate far beyond what Canada has been able to absorb.
The crazy thing about this speech is that this has been going on for a number of years now, and the government itself put the policies in place. How on earth could they not know that this immigration explosion wouldn't result in a massive crisis? Now, why are countries like Canada and Australia obsessed with mass migration? Well, for one reason, it keeps the economy growing. You've got more people buying more goods and services, so the overall economy grows. But when you look at the economic effect per individual, they're actually going backwards. If we compare the US with Canada's GDP per capita, which means economic growth per person, the US is rising strongly while Canada's economic growth is declining. Canada's GDP per capita has now decreased for 6 consecutive quarters. So while there may not be an official recession, there's a per capita recession, which means overall people are feeling less wealthy. And you can see that by the retail figures. Overall, retail figures are climbing, but that's because of the surge in population. If you look at the real retail sales per capita, it's clear that people are spending less. Now here's one of the scariest things for Canada's economy. Business insolvencies or bankruptcies have surged to multi-year highs. Is this a sign that the entire Canadian economy is in big trouble? Well, it certainly certainly a worry. And if Canadians really start drastically reducing their spending, we could see a huge increase in layoffs as companies try to protect their profits. And that could put further downward pressure on spending, which would then just snowball into a massive recession. So Canada has pushed unprecedented mass migration numbers, and now we're starting to see cracks in the economy. Housing is shocking, cost of living is terrible, homelessness is surging, bankruptcies are surging. Overall, Canada's entire economy and society is in upheaval. And this should serve as a massive warning for Australia, who seem to be headed right behind Canada, running the same sorts of policies that lead to disaster. I'm Biko Konstantinos.